Hello everyone and welcome to the National Army Museum for this week's Friday Insight. The museum is the national home of the history and heritage of the Army, a place where you can experience the story of the Army from the perspective of those who have served in it. There are many ways to support the museum. You can buy a book in our shop, visit the cafe, donate or become a member where you can get exclusive discounts and your very own events programme. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Noel Hannan. Noel served as a soldier and officer in the Territorial Army and Army Reserve. After a career spanning 5 decades and multiple mobilisations and operational deployments, he retired in 2024. In civilian life, he is a cybersecurity consultant with C3IA Solutions and a widely published science fiction writer. Today, Noel will be exploring the 25-year history of the Land Information Assurance Group, also known as Cyber Squadron. Today, Noel will be selling copies of his book at the back of the room. Moving on, there will be time for questions at the end of this discussion for both our online and in-person audiences. For our online audience, you can post a question in the chat bar, and these will be put to the speaker at the end. In person, if you raise your hand, I'll come around with the mic. Moving on with some technical points. Should we encounter any technical issues, please bear with us while we work to rectify them. If your stream freezes, we suggest that you click the refresh button at the top of your browser. That usually cures all ills. A member of our team will be active in the chat bar to assist you should you have any issues or queries. With that all said, I'll now pass over to Noel and hope you all enjoy the talk.
Thank you very much, Amy. I'd just like to say welcome everybody here to this wonderful venue, National Army Museum. I've spent many a happy hour in here over the years. Absolutely wonderful place. So I'm going to talk to you today about my book, Cyber Squadron. As Amy pointed out, it's here. Copies are available at the back if you'd like to buy one later. If you've already bought one and you'd like to, you brought it with you for me to sign, please do. I've done one of those already. Thank you very much. We'll be talking about that today. So Cyber Squadron is essentially, it's a second edition. I wrote it up originally in 2019 as Hacker Troop. This was privately published, just 100 copies for the unit at the time on its 20th anniversary. And its 25th anniversary coincided with my decision to retire from the Territorial Army and my reserve as it was at that point. So it seemed the right thing to kind of update it and what have you, and that's where it is today. So without further ado, quick intro to me. I've worn all the cap badges listed below there up to the Royal Signals one. Over a sort of 40-year period, I've actually soldiered in 5 different decades, which is a little bit staggering when you think about it. In my day job, I'm a principal consultant with C3IA Solutions, a National Cybersecurity Centre certified consultancy. I also write fiction and non-fiction, mainly science fiction, and I'm also a member of the International Guild of Battlefield Guides. I specialise in D-Day and post-D-Day Western European operations, and more recently, cyber warfare. I am, I think, the only IGBG guide who specialises in cyber warfare at this point in time. I've no doubt there will be others over a time period. Quick disclaimer, my book was rather laboriously approved by the MOD. Doesn't take 5 minutes to do something like that. However, the talk today, I may express opinions which are not of the MOD, and if there are any issues with that, they should come directly back to me. Thank you. As everyone breathes, what's he going to say? Okay, well, let's get started. So, what is LIAG? What is your profession? Well, if Leonidas had shouted that to us at the hot gates of Thermopylae in 480 BC, we would, of course, answered, I'm an information assurance consultant, sire. There wasn't a great call for them at the hot gates that day. So we'll move on to what we really are. So what is a LIAG, or more accurately, what is the LIAG? So just pause for a second. I'm completely cybernetic now with glasses and hearing aids, so I'll have to go to my glasses for this one. So in essence, it's a unit of Army Reserve officers from the Royal Signals and other corps and regiments. It's made up of ex-regulars, former mainstream Army Reserve, of which I was one of, and specialist officers with no former military experience. The majority of them are civilian cybersecurity matter experts. Not everyone, I'll come back to that. We were formed in 1999 BC, that was before cyber. That's the best joke in the book, the only joke in the book, perhaps. And it celebrated its 25th anniversary in 2024. 161 people have been members of it over that period of time, and its current strength is 64, including the small permanent staff cell. So what was it created for? Well, in essence, it was to provide information assurance, information security, and network penetration testing to Army formations. That was its initial raison d'etre. Does it have a unique selling point? Well, yes, it does. When it was created, and right to this day, it is the only deployable element of the cyber reserve. So there's lots of cyber reservists now. There wasn't so many back in those days, and we didn't call it cyber. But it remains the only deployable element of the cyber reserve. And by deployable, I mean that its soldiers can be mobilised and sent into hostile environments. And that's its raison d'etre. So in terms of the makeup of the unit, the ratio of ex-regulars, former mainstream Army Reserve and specialist officers is, last time I looked at it anyway for the book, it was about a third of each, which I think is a great balance, that is, because it brings that kind of, the deep experience of the regular army and other regular formations, and the sort of the deep technical knowledge that a specialist might bring in at possibly age 40, which is the kind of the sweet spot for recruitment, and bring in a lot of civilian knowledge at that point, which is really what it's all about. One of our former officers who's here today, I do count 7 former comrades in the audience, including one of our longest-serving commanding officers. But one of my former comrades used to refer to the non-specialist LIAG officers as muggles. So we've always had a few muggles in the unit to do the things that we didn't really want to do, like chief of staff and other roles like that kind of we weren't really into. It's worth pointing out at this point, and I'll come back to this point, that we were created within the constraints of military staffing in 1999. That influenced the way in which we were commissioned, and it also influenced the creation of the kind of the type of unit. And it remains to this day a specialist unit. And what that means is the minimum commitment that a reservist is required within a specialist unit is 19 days. Now, 19 days over a year is not a long period of time. And many of us served for many, many more days than that. But that remains its attribute in that way. So, stepping sort of the year before the unit, we start a journey with the Strategic Defence Review of 1998. So, I shall read this. I don't normally read slides that are up on the screen, but I will do on this occasion. So our reserve forces must also adapt to the new world. We must make our reserves relevant and usable by integrating them more closely with regular units and improving their training and specialist skills so that we can deploy them more easily on operations. Strategic Defence Review 1998. What happened 3 years later? 9/11, and of course the whole world changed at that point in time. So new governments tend to have strategic defence reviews or strategies within their first year. We've just had one now. I'll come back to that later. Tony Blair's administration, coming into power in 97, was no exception, and the genesis of LIAG was within that particular review, with the intent on making the reserve forces more deployable. This would become extremely important just a few years later, post 9/11, which would see significant quantities of reservists mobilised for the early Afghanistan support operations, Telic, and then, of course, Herrick. So let's talk about the creation of the unit. So some precedents and antecedents. We'll talk about Colonel Paul Actor and the Digitised Brigade and the IT pool. You could very much class Colonel Paul as the sort of the grandfather of LIAG, really. I had a very long and interesting session with him a few years back, and the interview is in the book, about our recruitment selection, and then this concept of the professionally qualified officer. So in Cyber Squadron, there's a significant section on the precursors to the creation of the unit, including an interview with Colonel Paul, who served as Colonel TA Royal Signals 1997 to 2000, and in this role as the Senior Reservist Advisor to the Signal Officer-in-Chief Army. And as such, he was instrumental in the development of LIAG's route to market, so to speak. Absolutely fundamental to this process also was Major, later Lieutenant Colonel Alan Evans, OBE, serving as the unit's project officer during inception, and then as its second CO before leaving to found the Land Information Communication Support Group, also known as LIXG, which is now the modern 254 Specialist Group Information System Signal Squadron. Additionally, the process of commissioning and training as a professionally qualified officer was copied over from the military, medical and legal branches for the first time by the Royal Signals, with suitably qualified and experienced individuals without any mandated previous military experience could be commissioned to captain within an 8-day period at Sandhurst. This was later expanded to 2 times 14-day periods. The rationale for commissioning to such a rank was based around 2 elements. The first, that individuals would warrant a commensurate military rank to their civilian occupation, and that an individual requires a certain rank to have a voice within a staff officer environment, such as a formation headquarters, and that captain was an appropriate entry level. In my personal experience, I found the promotion from captain to major to have a significant positive effect on my ability to influence and make my observations and recommendations of value known in certain environments. What I found was that captains were 10 a penny in a formation headquarters, unfortunately. So I could see why they did that. It worked, but certainly the move to major I found it very significant. There's also an interesting, possibly a little controversial point. At some point in LIAG's history, the validity of the PQO process for the Royal Signals was challenged on the basis that there were no formal standard qualifications, certifications or governing bodies in the same way that the medical and legal bodies had well-defined governance. This concern was addressed and the title changed to that of Specialist Officer, but with no other significant changes in status occurring. However, it remains to this day that despite sterling efforts by many organisations, there remains no single definitive governing or certification body for cybersecurity. That could change at some point in the future. So this is a very interesting piece, very prescient piece, I think, in the Sunday Telegraph from 12th of May 2000. Note the very, very early term of the use cyber here. It was another 11 years before cyber was really publicly acknowledged in the National Security Strategy of 2010, and then the subsequent first National Cybersecurity Strategy in 2011. So I must thank Lieutenant Colonel John Kirby, our first CO, for preserving this priceless piece of history. I think I photographed it on his kitchen table. He wouldn't let me take that particular clipping away. But there's some great information in there about what the teams had found in Kosovo on one of their first tasks, and we'll come back to that in a second. But a great sort of priceless piece of our history there, which I'm very pleased to have preserved. So onto the creation of the unit now and the first tasks and deployments. So we'll talk about the Gang of 6, including 3 Johns. Having the name John was a really good good attribute when you first joined LIAG in those days. We'll talk about the concept of the Chinese Parliament, and then we'll talk briefly about the first 3 tasks. ISIS, unfortunately named, it was the, I always have to look this one up. It was the Integrated Staff Information System, not the terrorist organisation. There was an IA doctrine paper, so right at the start, LIAG was being used to develop and drive doctrine, and we've done that many times since, probably most recently with our input into the MOD Cyber Primer. And then Task 3, which was the first deployment to Kosovo, and we'll talk about that again in a second. And then from that period, you'll see that period crosses 9/11. The deployments to Oman and Saudi Arabia in support of that, and CENTCOM, Florida, post 9/11. So original Gang of 6, this was Alan Evans, Chris Barrington Brown, or BB as everyone knows him, Brian McMillan, and the 3 Johns, the Burnage, the Bosley and the Pringle, who always sound like a firmest list to me. All Royal Signals apart from BB, who was Royal Artillery, and Brian McMillan, who was Parachute Regiment. So John Kirby, another John, Lieutenant Colonel John Kirby, our first CO, clearly understood the pros and cons of having subject matter experts under his command. The Chinese Parliament was clearly the way ahead, having been a staple of the Special Forces community, and essentially, if you're unfamiliar with what it is, it gives a voice to everyone in the room. I've no idea why it's called the Chinese Parliament. I'm listening to an audiobook about the Chinese Revolution at the moment, and those Chinese parliaments did not give a voice to everyone in the room, quite clearly. So if you know the origin of that, please come and tell me later. In my personal experience, this has survived in some way, shape or form with the intervening 10 commanding officers and is still going strong. And I must point out, this is the first time ever I've been in a room presenting in front of other LIAG officers without getting heckled or interrupted. They must be sitting on their hands at the moment. So yeah, first task, the unfortunately named ISIS, and then the IA doctrine paper that was primarily authored by Chris Beebe, our token at the time Royal Artillery officer. We have had others. So let's get some photos on the go. So this is from Kosovo, task number 3 in 2001, and it contains 4 of the original gang of 6. And in fact, one of them's in the room at the moment, aren't you, Ian? So from left to right, Captain Brian McMillan, LIAG's only ever parachute regiment badged officer. Major John Tideman, who sadly passed away in 2024, and he's one of the dedications in the book. Captain John Pringle, still going strong in service, I believe. Captain Ian Sneed, who's here with us today. Major Alan Evans, who would become the 2nd commanding officer after John Kirby. And Captain Ed Moses, who was the first ever Royal Signals professionally qualified officer. So if you recall, we mentioned LIAG's unique selling point, deployability. So what I would define that as is to safely be able to be sent into, operate and carry out function in a hostile environment. Kosovo in 2001 may not have been quite as intense as Iraq and Afghanistan in later operations, but the barbed wire and military personnel in that photograph are there for a reason, and this was very much a shape of the things to come. So this is Captain Dave Moore, another early LIAG officer, and in this picture he's receiving the Commander-in-Chief's coin from General Tommy Franks, CENTCOM Tampa, Florida, on the 4th of June 2002. He wasn't the last LIAG officer to go technically missing in action when taskings kept getting renewed and extended in the early days of the War on Terror in the aftermath of 9/11. We would later lose Major John Burnage in Kenya for a period of time, in a situation not too dissimilar to that of Colonel Kurtz in Apocalypse Now, more of which later. And if you are going to go missing in action, there are worse places than Kenya and Tampa, Florida. So this is where it starts to get interesting, I think, if it wasn't interesting enough already, and busy. It's also the period at which I entered the unit. That's got nothing to do with it. As we talk through this section, I'd like you to bear in mind that LIAG was, and still is, a specialist unit with a 19-day per year minimum commitment. This is quite a long one, this, so I need a drink of water first. Okay. So, just to step through what's on the screen there, Telic 1 in Iraq, field infosec team and a computer forensics team to aid sensitive site exploitation, or SSE. We'll come back to that. We did 13 tasks in Iraq, 2003 to 2009, including Op Brockdale, which was the drawdown in 2009. During that time period and beyond, certain LIAG members maintained a high readiness with level 1 military annual training test twice a year and basic combat skills to keep that deployable level up. We also participated in the recovery from the Agent BTZ malware infection in December 2008. A LIAG team had some involvement in Georgia just prior to the Russian incursion in 2008, and we have a long-running association with Kenya and the British Army training team there that I'll come back to as well. So we'll start with Telic. So Telic, or the UK commitment to operations in Iraq from 2003 to 2009, warrants its own chapter in Cyber Squadron, including an extensive piece entitled Our Manhattan's Project. You probably need to read that to get the joke, really, but we'll come back to that. Detailing Phil Hatton's adventures, and I don't use that term lightly, along with John Pringle in Iraq during and in the immediate aftermath of the invasion, where the main effort was the search for evidence of weapons of mass destruction. Well, unfortunately, we know how that turned out, didn't we? However, Phil and John did find some other very interesting digital artifacts in what was essentially a pre-internet environment. You'll be able to read about some of these in the book, and some of those things you will not be reading about, at least not in my book. LIAG maintained a demanding tempo of tasks in support of Telic right through to the drawdown of UK forces on Op Brockdale in May-June 2009, with individuals maintaining a high readiness state for mobilisation and deployment via effectively a double training commitment to keep military skills, the military annual training tests at level 1 throughout the year. It also introduced basic combat skills packages taught by infantry instructors to augment what would have been, in pure specialist officer cases, fairly minimal military training that they would have carried out by that point, in order to attempt to increase survivability and reduce risk in hostile environments, where often the biggest threat to a LIAG team would be a road or air move between protected locations or indirect fire into a base. And I'm very proud to say that that training and that doctrine really paid off. And we never lost a person during that entire period, which is good. So in the middle of all this, in 2008, a serious malicious software, or malware as we call it, infection known as Agent PTZ, hit military systems worldwide, maybe known in US circles as Buckshot Yankee. This resulted in significant involvement from LIAG teams in support of both Telic and Herrick in theatre, and from the relatively new Global Operations and Security Control Centre, the GOSC, in Corsham, including a team who were literally on the steps of an aircraft about to return to the UK from Afghanistan and were turned around to support. Again, in 2008, this was a busy year for the unit. A LIAG team was deployed on 2 separate tasks to the former Soviet Republic of Georgia to assist in its efforts to join NATO. Shortly after the second task completed and the team returned to the UK, the Russians attacked Georgia with what is commonly regarded to be the first overt coordinated cyber and kinetic attack, with cyber assets targeting Georgian government and transport systems, while ground troops occupied the enclaves of South Ossetia and Abkhazia, where they remain to this day. Georgian Ministry of Defence IT systems held up well in comparison to their civilian counterparts, due in part to the prompt actions of Georgian personnel acting under recent LIAG direction. Also, and finally in 2008, LIAG began a long-running association with the British Army Training Unit Kenya, BATUK, providing security governance for a project to install a modern network to support a vastly increased UK troop presence there as the conflict on 2 fronts continued. As a component of the newly formed Specialist Group Royal Signals, which also included LIXG that we referred to before, and 81 Signal Squadron, this was a pretty unique effort from an entirely reserve formation. This was also the scene of the aforementioned Colonel Kurtz incident, of which we will speak no more, other than to recall who would have known the ability to pilot a paddle steamer upriver would be so critical in order to rescue some software licenses. So, Telic team, 2003, left to right, Major Tom Fairfax from the Queen's Own Yeomanry, Captain Ian Sneed, Royal Signals, Captain John Pringle, Royal Signals, and Captain Phil Hatton, Royal Artillery. So the team split in this photograph is quite clear. Major Fairfax and Captain Sneed on the left remained in the southern sector in support of UK forces for the majority of their tour, while Captains Pringle and Hatton would move north to Baghdad for the majority of theirs, and it is that period which is covered in great detail in the book. I'm not exaggerating when I say that the activities in Baghdad are worthy of a Netflix series in the vein of Catch-22. And if that does occur, as a result of the publicity here and in Cyber Squadron, I'm hoping that John and Phil will look kindly on my part in that. Thank you in advance. I'd also like you to sort of get this photograph in your mind, because I'd like to compare it to a photograph that's a little bit further on of a team in Afghanistan. In terms of the change of posture, the training, can't see training in a picture, but the kit and equipment is absolutely immense in the intervening years. And as you will see, Phil is still wearing a pair of black boots in that photograph. And here we have, this is Phil Hatton's citation and eventual US Army Achievement Medal for service on Telic. Until recently, this was on display in the LIAG exhibit in the Royal Signals Museum, Blandford. And I did think for a couple of weeks that I'd lost it. But I didn't, luckily, which is good. So, moving on to 2012 to 2019. So, this is the period takes us up to when the first book, Hacker Troop, was published. We also opened the Royal Signals Museum exhibit in September 2019 as part of the 20-year celebration then. So, we'll talk a bit more about Herrick. That one dragged on a bit. Support to the Olympics in 2012. US and UK exchange activity, creation of Joint Forces Cyber Group, our involvement in the Cyber Guard and Cyber Flag series of exercises, and then Ops Cabrit, which is Estonia, and Territorial, which is post-Herrick Afghanistan. So, during, just to wind back and forward a little bit, 2004 to 2016, LIAG completed 31 tasks in Afghanistan involving 30 personnel, covering pre- and post-Herrick operations in which UK forces were involved. That's a legacy I'm personally very proud of, and I'm sure the unit is too. You may recall in 2012, issues around the provision of commercial contract security services to the Olympics led to mobilisations of members of the armed forces, both regular and reserve, in support. Bearing in mind the UK was still deeply committed to Afghanistan at that point, plus a residual presence in Iraq and other locations around the world, it was quite an ask. A LIAG team assisted in the Cyber Operations Centre for the duration, among other tasks. I personally look on this period in 2012, coinciding as it did with the Diamond Jubilee of our late Queen, very fondly, although I did oversleep after returning from a task in Afghanistan and missed the Olympic torch passing within a short distance of my front door. It was a time when Britain could be proud of itself for all the right reasons, and I feel we are quite some way away from that moment right now, in my humble opinion. Once again, 2012 forward was a very, very busy period. Multiple tasks in Afghanistan, the establishment of a specialist group role signal shooting team, which subsequently competed in the core operational shooting competition at Bisley. Several officers started as students on the master's degree in cyber defence and information assurance at the Defence Academy, Shrivenham, just as it started to become our new home for collective training. Bear with me a sec, going a little dry. There we go. So as we drew down from Afghanistan, we began to form ties with a new US National Guard cyber unit, the Virginia Data Processing Unit, or VADPU. And we'll continue this for many years to come afterwards, with many US personnel visiting us and us to them. We also introduced battlefield tours to Normandy as a component of their visit here, which was quite poignant for many of them, as Virginia is home to the 29th Infantry Division, a predominantly Guard unit which suffered horrific casualties on D-Day at Omaha Beach, and that was where I developed my own focus on that for battlefield tour guiding. This exchange also led directly to the establishment of a LIAG team on the CyberGuard series of exercises from 2014 forwards, and in the first year LIAG deployed a large team for an unprecedented 3 weeks to the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia. It's fair to say LIAG acquitted themselves well in this particular exercise, which resulted the following year in a conversation between President Barack Obama and Prime Minister David Cameron, which I will insist on leaving for you to read about in the book. It is a good story. LIAG still maintains roles, mainly in white team and mentoring, in many of the subsequent US, UK and NATO cyber exercises, a legacy, again, I'm very, very proud to have been part of. If that wasn't enough, this period also saw the formal creation of the Joint Cyber Unit, the Joint Forces Cyber Group, and the overarching formation of a Cyber Reserve, of which LIAG became an integral and irreplaceable component. It is fair to say that LIAG was not always considered in such a way, and there was a fair degree of insouciance to the fact that a mature Cyber Reserve unit already existed. There were some political challenges during this time period, which I'm pleased to say LIAG prevailed. Oh yes, we also went back to Afghanistan for Optoral and began supporting the enhanced Forward Presence Battle Group in Estonia. Did I mention that we were reservists? You've got to start to question if that was really an accurate term for us at this point in time. And in fact, because we're doing well for time, I'm going to share with you the Barack Obama and David Cameron story. This is direct from the book. LIAG's performance on CyberGuard 14 also became the subject of a presidential and prime ministerial conversation. During President Obama's visit to the UK in 2015, the President congratulated Prime Minister David Cameron on the performance and input of the LIAG team. The Prime Minister was at that point unaware of the UK's involvement and managed to get a discreet query out of the meeting room to a military aide elsewhere in number 10. The military aide had by chance a LIAG officer's number in his phone, who was contacted and who in turn contacted the author, me, who had been the team leader. Luckily, I'd already prepared a single-page briefing on the exercise for another purpose and was able to email this through to the military aide, who presented it to the Prime Minister during a break from the meeting, and he was able to discuss it with the President when they reconvened. The information was provided to him approximately 20 minutes after he first requested it. That's a pretty good flash-to-bang time, and I may have dined out on that several times since, as you do. Okay. Something else that was developed in this time period, quite important, and still remains extant to this day, possibly with some minor changes to formations and naming, was what we call a CONEMP, so a concept of employment. And this was introduced somewhere between 2015 and 2016 by the commanding officer at the time, Lieutenant Colonel Jenny Ellis. So it's made up of, I'm going to count them now, is it 5 or 6, whichever. LIAG is a formed unit that provides cybersecurity services across the UK, Ministry of Defence, as directed by Joint Forces Cyber Group, as it was. LIAG delivers a capability that complements rather than merely reinforces the regular armed forces? Again, that's the question, were we really reservists? LIAG's primary focus is to support deployed operations at theatre level, the deployability. LIAG's primary mission is cyber mission assurance in direct support of the deployed commander's mission. Due to the nature of LIAG as a reserve unit, LIAG rarely undertakes enduring tasks. We have done many enduring tasks, I think, over the years for various reasons. Some more photographs now, and I need to little drink again. So this is Lashkargah Police Station, May 2012. This was the photograph that I asked you to, this is the photograph that I'd like you to compare with the one that you might remember from a few slides ago. There's 9 years in between these two photographs, but we look like Starship Troopers compared to the team in Iraq at that point with all the protective equipment and what have you. So left to right, this is Captain James Brown, Captain Angus Young, and I think that might be me on the right. Clearly, having James Brown and Angus Young, and if you're not familiar with Angus Young's namesake, he's the lead guitarist of AC/DC. Having them on the team meant that there was always a chance we'd get mistaken for a combined services entertainment troupe, and as such get an accommodation or transport upgrade. Alas, that did not happen in my memory. Here we have the shooting team here, so members of LIAG, Licksheen 81 Signal Squadron. We could not have done this, we could not have achieved the range time, training and other requirements of this in a safe and professional manner without the NCOs of 81 Squadron, and many remain good friends and comrades to this day. That might be me in the centre. Younger, slimmer, no beard, all them things. Here's the LIAG contingent in June 2012. They're outside the National Guard Training Centre in Little Rock, Arkansas. This was the very first exchange visit that we did with the VA-DPU. Excuse the names of the VA-DPU officers, although I do think the guy on the right is a gent called DM Blagg that I've met as well. Actually, I wasn't on this particular trip. But left to right, obvious Brit uniforms there. Captain Kev Wood, Captain Ed Moses, Captain Andy Settle, who's here today, Captain Andy Cuff, and Captain Mark Stanhope around the statue of the Minuteman, which is the symbol of the US National Guard. There is a Photoshop version of this with a Union flag draped over it as well, which for years I thought was real because it is a really good Photoshop job. So just flicking back to CyberGuard for a second. So the CyberGuard series of exercises that we started in 2014, on that first one where we had a large team and we were there for 3 weeks is a lot of time in sort of reserve world. And it did give us a chance we had a week of what they refer to as academics, and it really gave us a chance to try something a little bit different, because this wasn't response in civilian roles. So on CyberGuard 14, we developed pretty much on the fly, and from the experience of team members who worked in cyber incident response, this hunt and harden model, which divided the team up into two distinct areas of responsibility, linked by a battle captain, 2IC, reporting up to the team leader, and the hunt and harden teams themselves. When this was presented to other CyberGuard participants, several hundred individuals, mainly from the National Guard in the FBI Academy auditorium, the interest shown was visible and palpable. They all leaned forward, essentially, to take a closer look at it, as team leaders raced to draw it in their notepads and then go and implement it. It turned up later in the US Cyber Command Blue Team Manual and the UK equivalent, and LIAG has never been formally recognised for its development. Unfortunately, the Mexican restaurant napkin it was originally drawn on was not preserved as historic evidence. We'll look at that later then. Yeah, there we go. So now the optoral team, Kabul Airport, March 2016. Mixed team of regulars and reservists, not the first time that had occurred. Excuse other individuals' names that I don't know that are on this photograph, but third from left, Captain James Brown once again, tallest man ever in LIAG, I think. Then Captain, now Colonel, Bruce Dorian Clark, and then Major Andy Campbell, who's here with us today. Note again the increase in sort of posture, equipment, and overall, look and feel of the kit that we were issued with at that point in time. So, bringing things right up to date. Op Cabrit in Estonia, Rescript was support to the COVID task force, Fortis, the carrier, and Op Orbital Ukraine. as we've outlined on here. So I'd like to focus really on Rescript here, which is the support to the COVID task force. So as with all military units, LIAG needed to realign its operational and training model. And it began with early adoption of Microsoft Teams and a rapid development of remote testing techniques, including the deployment of a virtual LIAG testing laptop into cloud environments. It's fair to say that for many reasons, this period was a steep learning curve for all involved, layered as it was with increased personal, family and civilian commitments due to the extraordinary situation we all found ourselves in. LIAG also assisted in security testing of NHS test and trace applications, if you remember them. And it would be remiss of me not to mention a citation received during this period by LIAG's Lieutenant Colonel Jeff Tremaine, a much loved and respected member of the unit, who pioneered Project Skill, which for the first time recorded civilian qualifications for reservists. So, for example, that an infantry officer, who was in fact a civilian lawyer, could be identified and his or her skills utilised in an operational setting. This became a real game changer during the preparation to support the Nightingale mass treatment facilities, which fortunately were never fully needed. But this was a great dry run, not that COVID could really be called a dry run, but this function that was never really, sort of the glass was never broken on, that remains a significant asset in times of crisis. So here we are on the flight deck of HMS Queen Elizabeth, April 2021. Left to right, Major Ben Shepherd-Smith, Captain Paul Ogden and Major Warren Kane, and possibly me on the right-hand side. Note the rear end, the stern, I believe it's called in the trade, of HMS Prince of Wales, just over my right shoulder. The other of the carriers, obviously, and two Type 45 destroyers parked in the background. This is the carrier strike group assembling for what would be the fleet flagship's maiden voyage to the Far East the following month. Having the two carriers nose to stern in port is probably never a good idea, and it will probably never happen again. I may have highlighted that in the final report. A bit out of our remit, but I felt the need to point that out all the same. And before we move into the future, I checked a couple of days ago with current Commanding Officer LIAG, Lieutenant Colonel Pete Villiers. LIAG is currently on task number 967 since task 001 in 1999. That's an average of 37 tasks per year, or 3 tasks per month. Not bad for a bunch of reservists, eh? And he also asked me to point out, if you're interested in joining, he would like young techs, and by young I think he means around 40, something like that, or somewhere between 30 and 40, and able to withstand that month at Sandhurst. Remember the USB deployability, which has not changed. So, and finally, what will the next 25 years look like? Well, I do write a bit of science fiction. Hopefully this is just the science and not the fiction. What will NIAG need to deal with in the next 25 years? Well, we've just had a strategic defence review. What did that say about cyber? Well, it said a lot about cyber. It changed STRATCOM into the Cyber and Specialist Operations Command, CSOC, and embedded within that the Cyber and Electromagnetic Command. The concept of the digital targeting web, so shared situational awareness, sensor feeds, and artificial intelligence making sense of all this, because the human brain just isn't fast enough anymore, is it? And leveraging AI, no surprises there, really. Something I've been dealing with in my civilian world for the last sort of few years is edge compute. And what that essentially is, it's kind of the complete opposite of cloud computing. It's having very powerful compute platforms where you need them. So in your aircraft, in your vehicle, in your boat. And the ability then to process data and carry out quite high-end compute actions without the need for connectivity. So what we're prepping for here is fighting in a digitally degraded battle space. So when we look at Ukraine, and everything now is really kind of predicated around the lessons learned from Ukraine, the Russians and the Chinese are very, very good at degrading the electronic spectrum in a battle space, and we need to be able to operate without connectivity, essentially. Linked to that, software-defined radio. That's a really big thing these days. Once you introduce software into an RF system, you're increasing the attack surface. You're increasing the ability for an adversary to put malicious software into that, and it's starting to blur the distinction between radio systems and compute systems as well. We're well down that road now. Further blurring of the lines between information technology, operational technologies, Internet of Things, and radio frequency, and the whole increase of attack surface within that. Drones and robots, well, you don't really need me here to tell you how that is progressing. Virtual reality and augmented reality, both in training and in ops, so shared situational awareness, for example, massive increase in the attack vectors that are possible there. And then I'm not going to talk to you about artificial intelligence today because I'm getting a bit tired of artificial intelligence professionally, to be perfectly honest. Every single day we come across an issue, positive or negative, around it, and it's something we've really got to grip and deal with. So I'm almost bang on for time, which is quite surprising if anybody knows me. I'd just like to end by bigging up the next book. I've actually got a launch date and party for this already. Not actually finished writing it as yet. That's a little bit scary, but hopefully it will focus my attention somewhat. So I'm currently writing this in a short form for Dispatches, which is the journal of the International Guild of Battlefield Guides. And as a result of that, I thought I might as well crack on and do a book about it. And it's my intent to launch that on the 25th of June next year at the Union Jack Club, because the IGBG have already booked me in to talk about it that evening. So I better get home and get on with it. Hey. Save the date. If you'd like to join us, let me know. Thank you to everyone for your time and attention today. And I would like to open the floor to questions.